Marcia Polis. I want to take you through some of the fascial release work to use in the chest and sternum area when you have to work when you're ill. So go back and read the article again, but essentially I want you to see what it looks like and what you'll be doing. This entire area is going to be tender to the touch if your fascia is dehydrated or if you have a respiratory infection. We'll start with the last piece that I get to relative to this, which is the sternum. So if you do have a cold or a respiratory infection, 99.9% of the time, you're actually going to be really tender at the sternum. The rest of the time you're not. No matter how locked up the rest of your fascia is or what other patterns you have, it's really rare that I find a client whose sternum is tender and sore if they aren't ill. So you want to go ahead and begin at the sternum and check that out. And then you want to find the space in between your ribs. And so right there, I don't know if you can see it, but right there I'm in between two little ribs. And it's nice, and there's a nice amount of space, and I think of it as doughy or juicy. And so I'm just checking to see if I have any tenderness. I don't, so I could move on to the next place. If you do have tenderness, you can use two fingers, kind of like this, and just sort of gently and slowly go back and forth until the fascia gets a little bit softer and the tenderness goes away. Or you can use one finger. Depends on really how big of a person you are. If you're a guy and you have bigger space between your ribs, you're going to be able to get in there with your fingers a little bit better than if you're someone who is has a more petite bone structure. So that's where you begin. That's where you can begin. If that's too difficult or too painful to begin with, start underneath the clavicle. So if you look, one of the things we're looking for is I want my clavicle to be even, which I don't think it quite is today. But I want clavicle even, so the bones I want exactly even one side and the other, and I want them to appear to be the same sort of depth. So if one of them has disappeared, which it feels to me like this one has a little bit less, I want to check and see where the fascia needs released, and it's on this side. So I can feel as I go right underneath the clavicle, this tissue is not quite as easy to dig into as over here. I just sink right in, and much easier, and it's much softer. So I'm going to start over here. I go right underneath the clavicle, and I do the same kind of gentle back and forth sawing motion until it would release a little bit. And then I find the next rib, and that's going to be here. And my fingers are right in between it, and I would soften this area and get it to release and get nice and doughy. And then once that does, I'd go down a little bit lower, and I'd keep on going. There's another one. So you find the angle, and you get your fingers in between, and you find the tender spot, and you release it. And for me, I think all of the pulling right now is actually right here. So I'm just a little tender, and I'm not quite as doughy as I want to be right there. If I release this area, which is not between ribs, but just that armpit tissue, it's probably going to release the rest of it out. So some of your original pattern, if you have a little bit of forward head position, some of that pattern might be part of what you're releasing out when you work on getting yourself more space and more air as you try and breathe when you're sick. That's not going to hurt any. It's, you know, every little bit will help. But really, you just want to go clavicle down between the ribs and get into that sternum. And you should all of a sudden be able to get a lot more space and air in through this area. So give it a shot, and I'm available in all kinds of ways via Twitter, online. If you have questions, love to answer them. As with anything, I'm not a doctor or your physician, and I haven't seen your body. So if this is counterintuitive to what you know about your body, or if it's exactly the opposite advice of what your physician is telling you to do, please don't do it. You know, let's be smart and not do something just because I told you to. I'm Marcia, and I'll see you again. Thanks.